So for our mantis, we are going to make all the details besides the legs. The legs will be made live when it's placed on top of the dagger. That's to ensure that everything looks organic. That's a really nice mantis, Tony. It looks like you've been doing this for a while. And in reality, Tony's been working with glass for over 20 years. Once again, he is a Hilltop Artist alumni, so he did begin to work with glass, I believe, at the young age of 14. So for our demonstration, this should take us all the way to lunch, so about 1 o'clock. We are only going to make two sculptures for the whole 8-hour day. So it is going to be time consuming, but there is a lot of detail that we are adding. To attach a lot of this detail, we're using a variety of flames. The larger propane one, the one with the open flame right now, is about 2,500 degrees. And we use that torch for a general heat. When you see Tony using the smaller of the two torches, the oxypropane torch, it's so hot that it can actually boil away the color or the clear glass, or even burn away the colored glass. You'll notice that oftentimes he just takes a quick heat to the round chamber. We refer to this as a glory hole. It's about 2,300 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's just to ensure that everything is at a good general temperature. Notice that Tony begins by torching where the clear glass and the rod, the steel rod, meet. That's because the steel rod is constantly stealing heat from the glass. So if this piece is going to break or crack, it's going to start where that clear and the rod meet. We call that the moil. And you'll notice that that's one of the main parts that we're always careful and we always ensure there's a lot of heat in that general area. If our mantis or any part of our mantis drops below 900 degrees Fahrenheit, then there's a chance of this breaking or cracking. There's a few terms that you may hear when we're working. If you hear our visiting artist saying flash, it typically means about 10 seconds inside of the glory hole. And once again, there's no glass inside of this chamber. It's just fire and heat that we make the glass more malleable and extend the working time. You can notice that there's a lot of unspoken communication going on. A lot of it has to do with just trust. Tony has been teaching a lot of these students for several years now. And when you work with a team consistently for a long period of time, you begin to trust them. And I always have to point this out that glass making, you just really need a lifetime to be able to get really good at it in our material. And Tony's been teaching some of these students for a year, some of them 3 years. But something that I've noticed is a lot of the advanced students that Tony has taught, they're at a really high proficiency of glass making in a short amount of time, which is just incredible. So we're only going to add three more legs to this, but again, the actual leg parts where it connects to our artifact, that will be made live hot when everything's put together. Once we're done with this mantis, we're going to begin to make what will be the handle and then the end portion and then the blade finally or lastly. Once everything's completed, then we can begin to join everything together. This demonstration should take us all the way to lunchtime at about 1 o'clock. And if you have any questions, my name is David, and I am more than happy to share my knowledge and experience. I have the honor and privilege of calling Tony a good friend, but also a really good mentor of mine that he's taught me a lot. I would say Tony was actually one of the instructors that really took me to a different level of glass making. He is so knowledgeable in our community, and his influence comes from a variety of glassmakers, including Patricia Davidson, who is a very known glassmaker in our community. But another inspiration that you'll notice, or the style that Tony works with, is very Italian-based sculpting. That's because when Tony was young, a master of glass, Pino Signoretto, would teach at the local high school, doing demonstrations every now and then. And this really inspired Tony to begin to sculpt with glass rather than actually blowing through a blowpipe to make vessels and cups. Sculpting for Tony was a better way of working with glass and really opened up a new way of working with the material. So most people just think that glass blowing is like simple bowls and cups and vases. As we see now, that's not the only thing we can do with our material. And glass blowing has a very misleading name because we're not always blowing through a blowpipe, as you can tell. A better term would be glass making, but it just happened to be that the term glass blowing is really what's stuck with our medium, although sometimes we don't blow at all. And for our audience that joined us a little later in our demonstration, I want to introduce our furnace. This is where the material began. We are melting 1,000 pounds of molten glass. And it's hard to believe, but our mantis looked very similar to what we have on the end of the rod on our right side about an hour and a half ago. Well, our mantis is nearly complete. Welcome to the Museum of Glass. Thank you for joining us. We've been working on a mantis for over an hour. I would say just under an hour and a half. Now, our mantis is essentially complete. That's the first element of today's demonstration. We will be placing this mantis on top of one of these daggers that you see on your right-hand side of the pedestal. So it's going to look very similar to the one that we have on this pedestal, except there's going to be a mantis on top. Now, to prevent this mantis from breaking and cracking, we're going to set it inside of a controlled environment called the garage. This is a place where we can park our glass and prevent it from breaking. It's about 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit on the hottest end and about 900 degrees Fahrenheit. Luckily, we have this piece of equipment. I would say it's one of the newer ones in the glass blowing field. If we didn't have this, we would just have to babysit this for about 2 hours until we are ready to use it. And I'm sure one of our team, I'm sure, Eli, you don't want to babysit this for a few hours. So instead of doing that, we'll place it inside of our garage until we are ready to use it. Well, if you're joining us, welcome to the museum. My name is David. If you have questions, I am more than happy to share my knowledge and experience of this medium. Oh, it looks like the team on the right is getting ready for a coloring application. Once again, our visiting artist has invited some of his students to hang out with them during this residency. This whole studio is for Tony. He can use it however he wishes. So he's not going to use the whole studio, so he just invited some students to hang out with him during this residency. Again, school is out, so there is no glassblowing studio available to them. So why not do it here at the museum? Hang out, maybe make some presents for the family, develop the hand skills. Glass blowing is all about repetition. So especially during the summer, it's a very nice treat for Tony to have our students out here working with the material. But what we just saw was a coloring application. The way that we apply color to glass, one way is by using solid color. We can see that one of the students on our right, she's now pushing that colored layer evenly around the bubble to create a thin layer of color. There's various ways we can apply color. This is one way that we can apply an even, dense amount of color. You'll notice that Tony uses a lot more broken up colored glass. That's because this will give us more of a natural, blotchier, spotted color effect rather than something even and dense. But Tony is already beginning on the next element. Now we have two furnaces here at the Museum of Glass. They're both holding approximately 1,000 pounds of molten material. We also saw that one of the students sprayed a little bit of water on the inside of the furnace. That's just to minimize the air bubbles that can be gathered on contact with the rod. So Tony is now working on what will be the handle portion of our dagger. Once again, our visiting artist is inspired by Mesoamerican cultures, and one specifically being the Aztec culture and their artifacts. Once again, Tony is beginning with creating the handle portion. We can alternate between using our furnaces to ensure good quality glass. We don't want any air bubbles or impurities in the material. And look at that coloring application. Depending how dense Tony wants this color layer to be, he can take one roll or he can take several rolls, like 20 of them. I believe Tony may be doing about a few rolls in this crushed up colored glass. Now the way that color is made is we just add different metal oxides of the periodic table to clear glass. So different metals will produce a different color. So Tony's favorite color to work with is black colored glass. The way we make black glass is by adding a ton of manganese to clear glass. If you add a little bit of manganese, you can produce purple glass. Now, if you like red glass, just means you have expensive taste. Red glass is made by adding gold. So once again, just different metals will produce a different color. Now, at the heat that we're working with, everything will just look red and orange. It's due to the intense heat known as black light radiation. But the true color will come back as the glass cools down, and we will see the true color of the glass tomorrow when this glass has been cooled down. But for the majority of the demonstration, it's just going to look red and orange, even though we're working with almost a brown tobacco color. Dude, just put a bunch of foam around it, Tony. Stuff it with foam. Wait, what? Stuff it with foam and induct it. Induct it? It'll stop the vibration from making it pop? You should always put your hand where the leaks are. So yeah, I would foam it, foam as much, squish foam in there. Squish foam, tape it, don't, and that will stop it. Don't be shy with the duct tape either. Just wrap it. Maybe even a towel on top of the mantis too. So foam and then a towel. Yeah, but then the towel will pop off and it gets sucked into the wheel. That's why you're going to be generous with the duct tape, right? I'll try that. Thanks. Thanks, Rios. I appreciate it. Because I haven't cold worked one with a mantis on it yet. Yeah, that's what I would do. And your hand should be on that mantis all the time. I cold worked a bunch and then picked it up in the garage and then put the mantis on it. It was just too much work. Because if it broke, I was going to be pissed. Because I cold worked for 3 hours. And then you take it out and then it breaks. Like, so yeah, that'd be a bummer. I'm out like a couple hours now. A couple hours and cold working. I do want to point out that essentially we are just creating a canvas for Tony. During our demonstrations, Tony will then take these artifacts back to his studio and then do a lot of surface work, especially on the dagger part, the blade up at the end that's represented by as obsidian. So this is cold work. Using centuries-old glass cutting and carving techniques, we can eliminate the top layer of color to expose the bottom layer. And even on our piece, there's going to be a giant chunk of clear glass that's on there for stability purposes, but it will be removed during the cold working process, and that will take a few hours for Tony to complete. So even though we're going to be done with this piece, I would say within a few hours, there's still several hours left, even after this piece is done here. Where did Tony receive his training? So Tony's been working with glass for over 20 years. In our Tacoma area, we're very unique because there's glass blowing in our middle schools and high schools. So Tony began to work with glass at the age of 14. He was taught by various artisans, one of them being Patricia Davidson. We do have some of her own artwork here at the Museum of Glass. She's a very notable glass sculptor in our community and blower. Another inspiration for Tony was master glass maker Pino Signoretto, which is a Murinese master of glass. There's very few masters of glass in our world. To my knowledge, there is no American master, but that master did teach during or did do demonstrations when Tony was in the program. And so you can tell that he is heavily influenced by Italian style of working with glass. Now, our Pacific Northwest area is like a melting pot of these different traditions of glass making. We are Italian based, but there is also other influences like Swedish glass making, where our wooden blocks come from. And you'll see the glass makers using these wooden light bulb blocks to ensure our mass is even. And for our audience that's joining us, we are creating a handle right now. When this handle is complete, we will place it inside of our garage. The last elements that are needed will be the pommel, which is the end portion, and then the actual blade. You'll notice that our visiting artist has taken a seat at the center of the studio, so we refer to Tony as our gaffer. The gaffer is the term we use for the person in charge, and he is orchestrating today's demonstration. He breaks up the workload among everyone else. Tony has also invited some of his students to help him out during today's demonstration, and these are some of his advanced students. So our gaffer, Tony Sorgenfree, has now called for a punty. And the punty is the transfer rod we use to begin to work on the opposite end. Now, luckily for our handle, Tony has also created a weak spot, which is a small crevice portion. We call this the jack line, but the jack line is just a place that we can add a little bit of water to break free from the rod. After all, this new punty, this new handle, is only temporary, so it will need to break later today. So today is the last, or this week is really the last week that Tony takes over our studio. He's been granted 2 days every week for 3 weeks, and this is concluding his residency. He has one more day tomorrow, and oftentimes as the demonstration progresses and the residency progresses, we get more complicated with either the the details or the scale of the sculptures that are created. Whenever we see the bright red and orange glow, we can assume that's the area we're going to be working on next. And Tony added a lot of texture to our massive glass. If you look very closely, you can begin to see the resemblance of wood in this demonstration. So Tony was saying that I should have gone to Wilson High School. I want to point this out because Wilson High School has a glass blowing program. It's very, very unique in our community. And that is where our visiting artist teaches. Now, our visiting artist also or has taught our programs here at the Museum of Glass. We have a Hot Shop Heroes program. This is where veterans use glass blowing as an art therapy. I believe the handle is nearly complete. We're gonna let it stabilize for a second or two, and then it can go inside of our garage and meet the mantis that we made earlier today. Our next element will be the pommel. The pommel is the end portion. On our dagger, it's a snake. On this artifact here, it's more of just a flat element. We'll have to see what type of pommel Tony will create next. So the garage, how does it function differently than the other annealers? The main difference is that there is a lot of doors that we can put the glass in and out. That is the major one. It's very similar to the annealer. It's just easier to access it. The flame is located, there's an open flame too. So the annealers have elements inside of them, very similar to how like a convection oven has it. This one has an open flame on this side. Again, it's about 1,000 degrees on this end and then 900 degrees on this other end. I love questions, by the way, so anytime. So is it going to be a similar process of attaching and detaching it from the rod? Very similar. We'll just add a little bit of water. The mantis and all these parts that we've made, we created a jack line, so a weak spot in the massive glass. We'll just add a little bit of water in that, and with a slight tap, the vibrations will cause the glass to crack in that designated area. Yep. So we're going to create a giant punny where everything will be built on, and it'll be after this element. So after this pommel, we'll create the blade, and the blade is where everything's built on. It gets pretty wild. It's going to get wild in here in a bit. You just give us a little bit of time. But essentially, our blade the rod will be located on this end, And so there's very little surface area to attach to this giant rod. So we'll attach a bunch of clear glass to act like a landing pad, essentially, build up the stability of our mass. Oh yeah, there is a fair amount of cold work. I would say maybe 3, 4 hours of cold working after we're done here. So there's a lot of details that will be exposed later on. Some of these pieces, like the one you see on your left, this has been sand carved. The technique of sand carving is similar to what we see in our Raven in the Box of Daylight by Preston Singletary. Using the sand carving techniques, Preston eliminates a top layer of color to expose the bottom layer. And the way that Tony uses it, he eliminates the glossiness of the glass, but then it's finished with a natural oil. Give it more of a wet look. Yes, more questions. I love these questions, by the way. So is our process similar to a potter's wheel or sometimes? So our question essentially is about the plan that we have. Is so is it our demonstration? Is there already a plan well advanced in, before we step onto our studio? So yes, there is. Even before we step onto our hot shop studio, Tony has a lot of sketchbooks that he references. Another thing is before we even begin, there's a quick powwow, quick meeting. Everyone understands their job during the demonstration, what is expected, and then what are some of the techniques that we're going to use throughout the demonstration. This is one of the highest levels of professional glassmaking, so there's a clear idea before we step on. Our students that you see on the right, they're going more with the flow, but they do have a general idea if, hey, I want a bowl or I want a vase. Ooh, Murano, oh, I love it. We're all about the creative freedom here at the Museum of Glass. So here at the museum, we're more focused of pushing glass as an art form. We're not here to sell you glass. We're not here to sell you bowls and cups. That's where our goal really here is to ignite and fuel the creativity using glass as the medium. So students are the age group of our students that we have here, again, Tony's advanced group. They all range from being sophomores to seniors in high school. And I believe some of them, they just graduate. Like our students that are helping here in the center, I believe they are seniors now this year, this coming year. And they're really advanced. It's hard to believe this because glass blowing, you just have to practice a lot. It's like playing an instrument. If you have a good instructor, great. That goes a long way, but ultimately, it's upon you how much time you put into a hot shop studio. And they've put a lot of time into this studio. University of Tacoma has a glassblowing program here at our museum. Besides that, there's also UW Seattle, which also has a glassblowing program. Our students that you see here, the Hilltop Artists program, they're allowed to be part of the program until they are 21. They just have to get some form of education. So if that's going to college or if that's going to university or community college, they just need to continue getting their education. But they can be part of that program until they're 21, where they graduate out of that program. I am fortunate enough to be one of these alumni. I love glassblowing. It's one of the reasons why I went to college, is because I wanted to continue working with glass. Although I didn't really want education, I had to be part of this program. Yeah, that's exactly the tie-in. So we have a small community of glass makers here. Again, we are the melting pot of different glass blowing communities, but we're also the mecca of glass blowing. So I have friends who've moved out from New York and from California just to continue their glass blowing career. RISD, ooh. So Rhode Island School of Design RISD program is supposed to be one of the best. Some of the best glass blowers are coming out of that program right now, and even some in New York. Oh, the garden glass. It's beautiful. Beautiful. So here in Tacoma, Dale Chihuly actually just donated a collection at our Union Station. So across our Chihuly Bridge, if you continue walking the Union Station, there's a beautiful Chihuly collection inside of there, a Persian wall that he donated to the city of Tacoma. So yeah, definitely after this. And it looks like it's a beautiful day here today. Also, lovely sun. If you're joining our area, if you're visiting the Tacoma area on a sunny, beautiful day like today, I would recommend you walk across Tacoma's waterfront. It is just gorgeous out there. And usually on a day like today, that's where I will hang out. If you love long walks on the beach, the Tacoma waterfront is a great location. At this time, I want to open the doors to our center chamber. It's about 2,300 degrees, and I just want to show everyone the type of heat that the glass makers are exposed to. Again, about 2,300 degrees, and we believe the term glory hole comes from when we open all the doors and the bright light that comes out. A glory hole is also described when the sun breaks through clouds. I'm gonna feel some of that heat. So the next time you come around, bring some marshmallows. We're gonna have plenty of fun down here. If you get cold during the winter, well, this is a great place to hang out. We can open a chambers just for our audience to stay warm. All right, Tony, you're ready. We're good. So Tony just finished applying powdered glass. When we're adding powdered glass, we do it at the ends of the museum for safekeeping. So the Museum of Glass is inside a very iconic cone-shaped structure. This cone-shaped structure was designed by world-renowned architect, Arthur D. Erickson. And it is a very functional hot shop shape. We have a natural chimney, and at the very top of our museum, we have a fan to accelerate the hot air rising. So we stay cool all year around. There's also an air system located below the stairs and our seats. So there's constant fresh air flowing into our hot shop floor. So all around the hot shop floor, we have our steel tables. These steel tables are used to shape the glass, shape the contours, and it also draws out heat from the glass. So if you're joining us, we are creating a pommel. The pommel is the end portion of our Aztec artifact. So this part down here. Once we're done with this, we're going to create the actual blade of our artifact. So when we look at the right-hand side, this is similar to what we are creating, the same type of handle and blade. When this pommel is complete, we're going to begin on the blade portion, and we can begin to assemble everything together. And the assembly portion will conclude our demonstrations. So our steel table that we have here, it draws and steals a lot of heat away from the glass. For that reason, we're using a kiln shelf, which is softer. Therefore, it's not stealing as much heat as the steel table does. We've also applied a little bit of wax on our kiln shelf. That's just to prevent it from breaking, or I'm sorry, from sticking. after this element is completed, we'll dive in deep to the glass blowing process and we'll essentially introduce all our equipment and what we're working with here. I do just want to give a little bit more time before we dive into that demonstration. I'm excited though. This is really the moment that we've been waiting for. This is essentially the last element, and then we can begin to build everything together and then essentially attach every piece. We did start off by making a praying mantis. That mantis is sitting inside of our garage, which is our oven on your left-hand side. Eventually, our mantis will be attached to our blade. We often get asked, how many pieces do we make a day? For today's demonstration, we will only make 2 sculptures since they are time consuming. You got it, boss. Well, a little bit of water is added to a crevice we made earlier, and then with a slight tap, it's broken free. We will now begin to work on the end portion of our pommel. Right. Now let's check in with the team on our right-hand side. Once again, Tony Sorgenfree is a local instructor in our community where he teaches local high school students. The team that you see on the right is his advanced students. What's up? You guys are the advanced students, bro. What's up? So anytime we see that bright red and orange glow, we can assume that's the area we're working on next. Now, Tony is using this intense flame. It's a mixture between oxygen and propane. Now, this torch is hot enough to boil away the clear glass or even burn away the colored glass that we are working with. For that reason, we're very careful when using this torch, ensuring that we're not overexposing the material. All right. Well, the pommel is essentially complete. So Tony has now instructed Jack Spitzer on our left-hand side again. Jack is on our left-hand side. And Jack is going to begin what will be the blade of today's demonstration. So this is the start to the end of our demonstration. And this is how everything is going to be built upon also. So we're going to follow Jack for this next few steps. We have our furnace on our right-hand side. We actually have two of these ovens. They're at they hold 1,000 pounds of molten material and are at 2,100 degrees Fahrenheit. So about the same temperature as molten lava. When we open this door, it just looks bright red and orange inside. There is a crucible inside that we are heating up, essentially a pot of glass is left on all year around. The process of gathering, we're going to repeat until we have enough glass to create the blade. And we are going to color it later on in the demonstration. You'll notice that since we need to gather more glass, we're not in a rush to add more material. This is because if we stabilize the core, instead of working harder, we work smarter. A, we can gather more glass, and B, we can maintain control over that hot layer that we've added. Our last element has now been placed inside of the garage. And our visiting artist, Tony Sorgenfrey, will begin the blade. Again, our visiting artist is inspired by the Mesoamerican cultures stemming from his own heritage. I have your door. I'm very friendly. So it's due to the viscosity of the glass that allows us to collect it. So on contact with the molten material, it sticks to the rod. So the viscosity of the glass is very similar to honey. So just like in the morning if you're eating pancakes or waffles for breakfast, The honey naturally sticks to your fork and knife. It's due to its thickness. Same thing is going on with our glass. Now, we preheat the rod up to 900 degrees. This ensures that the glass sticks properly to the rod. If we gather on a cold pipe, it's possible that that glass doesn't adhere properly and can fall off. Ooh, is that Zimmy? So the way that color is made is they add different metal oxides from the periodic table, and we can dive deep into the coloring application later on. Tony is just pointing out that the red that he's using for their demonstration is not made anymore. It's an old manufacturer, but it's a very unique red. A lot of reds are made from adding gold, so if the red or pink looks really nice, guaranteed they added gold to it. But that can essentially triple or quadruple the price point of other colors just due to the gold oxide that they've added. Now here we see Tony applying the first layer of colored glass. When we're done using this colored glass, I can bring it over to our audience and show it. Right behind you. So depending how dense Tony wants his color layer to be, he can take one roll or he can take several rolls. It is all up to him to decide the density of that color. So I do want to point out, or I want to walk around with some of the color that Tony is using. This is a red color, a gold ruby. Again, it's just made by adding different metals. If we have a favorite color out in our audience, we could make that color, but that means we would be stuck with that one color at the museum. For that reason, we buy our colored glass rather than making it, but we could make it once again. And this color will be used to create will be the rope part of our dagger here, so it will be used later on today. Nice octopi down here. So what's up, Eli? What's your favorite color to work with glass? Like red? You like pink? Gold? Cool colors, like sunshine colors. All right, to make a blue glass. You love blue glass, right? So we could make a little bit of blue here at the museum. We can add cobalt to our furnace of glass, but that means we would have 1,000 pounds of blue glass. I like blue glass. I'm okay with that, but I don't know if everyone else is okay with blue glass. And then pink glass. Ooh, the uranium color too. So pink glass we can make by adding a little bit of gold once again. So it makes it one of the most expensive colors in our industry. So this next layer, Tony only wants enough clear glass to protect his black colored glass that he's added on top. He doesn't want enough that you can visually see it. So for that reason, we're going to get rid of the majority of the clear glass we will gather and we will add. You'll notice again, he's not in a rush to gather. Instead of working harder, we are working smarter. Now, I do have to point out that black glass absorbs a lot of energy very quickly. So we refer to black glass as a soft color. Now, the clear glass that's removed, it can be reused. Now, we can take this clear glass and place it back inside of the furnace. But here at the museum, we separate it to ensure the quality of that glass. I do want to point out that the glass that we're melting here at the museum is not your ordinary glass. Our glass is being brought from Spruce Pine, North Carolina. So there's a rich history in glass making there in North Carolina. Now, this glass, the starting material, the silica sand, is being mined from a quartz mountain. The manufacturer is also adding a few other ingredients like soda ash and lime to stabilize the glass. Besides those materials, we do not know exactly what else they're adding or the ratios of this material. It is a top secret formulation that only the manufacturer knows. If we were to create our own formula of glass that's great for the process that you see here today, we could make a pretty penny. Coca-Cola glass can be used here at our museum, but the majority of that demonstration would be spent inside of the reheating chamber to make it more malleable. So our glass is specifically made to retain its heat and extend the working time that we have. Now, NASA uses a different formula of glass. They use straight silica sand. They don't add anything else. That's why their glass can exit the atmosphere like the International Space Station. Again, that glass is made with just silica sand, no additives. So I want to point out the colors that we're using. Tony is using a black color on the inside and then this brilliant red on the outside. What will happen next is then Tony will take this to a cold working studio, eliminate the red glass on the surface to expose the bottom layer of black glass, again similar to what we see on our pedestal. So essentially, we're just creating a canvas for Tony to use centuries-old glass cutting and carving techniques. Although we will be done with this sculpture by 1 o'clock, there's still several hours to work on left. So I want to point out that our reheating chamber is about 2,300 degrees Fahrenheit. You notice that Tony hung out here for a second. That's so when we heat it back up using this chamber, only the skin of the glass will get hot, so the red color can melt into our core of glass. In this case, we do that because we don't need everything hot. We just need the surface of this glass to become malleable. So the next color that we are adding is in a fine powdered form. When we're working with powdered glass, we use a specific piece of equipment. But on our big screen, let's learn a little bit more about powdered glass and how it can be used, once again, on our big screen.
Powder is the smallest size of colored glass available and can be very versatile when used in the creation of artwork. Powder is made by crushing frit in a ball mill. When used like frit, the powder is rolled through, and the heat of the gather is enough to melt the color onto the surface. Powder can also be sifted onto the outside of a bubble or gather to create various densities of pigmentation and shading. The application of different color powders can create both abstract designs and naturalistic color patterns, such as the skin of animals. Powder can be melted smooth or left dry and cakey on the surface of the piece.
So either way, when we're working with powdered glass, we're ensuring that that powdered material doesn't go into our lungs. Rather, it's sucked out of the Museum of Glass and not into our bodies. So we always use it in a controlled, safe environment. The Museum of Glass has some very high safety standards since we are a public institution. Essentially, there's computers regulating even the amount of gas going into our chambers to ensure the efficiency of them. There's also seismic meters built into the concrete foundation of the museum. So any sudden movement from the earth shuts off the gas. And a lot of these safety equipment isn't in most studios, but since we are a public institution, there's a lot of this added safety. Wait, are you talking about Old Town Road by Lil Nas X? That song is good. Did you say you wanted to hear it? Old Town Road by Lil Nas X? So all around the hot shop floor, we have these steel tables. We refer to them as a marver. The term comes that traditionally these tables were made out of a slab of marble. We can probably guess why we don't use marble anymore. Its price point. So if you're joining us, we are creating the blade portion of our Aztec artifact. It will look similar to the sculpture you see on the right-hand side of the studio on the pedestal. The only difference is we're going to add a mantis on top of this blade. And we have all the parts complete. This is the last portion, and then we can begin to build everything on top of one another. You're more than welcome to take as many photos and videos as you like. If you have an Instagram, we did post down Tony's Instagram where you can tag him. Just give us a heads up. We'll get our good side on the video. One of the best views of the demonstration I would always recommend is the top balcony of the museum. It's my favorite place to hang out at the museum. The only downside is that it's hot and you have to stand up, but it really is a unique view. I would say it's probably hotter where everyone is sitting at than where I roam around. Again, we have a very functional cone-shaped structure. There's even an air system, so there's constant air circulating here onto the hot shop floor. To ensure that our glass remains hot, instead of using the steel table, which steals a lot of heat from the glass, we will use a kiln shelf that also has a little bit of beeswax, a coat of beeswax, to ensure our mass doesn't stick. Anytime we use wood in the studio, you can assume it's one form of fruit wood, like cherry wood, which contains more moisture and just will last longer in our studio. An added bonus, it smells like a barbecue when we do burn it. Now, if you have any questions, my name is David. Happy Monday, everyone. At any point, you're more than welcome to raise your hand or shout my name, and we can answer some of the questions that you may have during our demonstration. And I love questions, so at any time in our demonstration, you let us know. At this moment, Tony created a break-off portion. Now, I know what you're thinking. Our patty of glass looks nothing like a blade right now, but we've already created a constriction. We're thinking ahead of the game. Since our massive glass is hot at this moment, we can create that break-off section. Now, it looks like our team on the right-hand side, they are nearly complete. So the last step that we take is to set it inside of a controlled environment. When we look at the history of glass, melting sand into glass, that was very easy. It was preventing it from breaking that took us the longest period in history, and the Egyptians struggled with this. They would just bury their glass in sand and hope it didn't break. But nowadays, we know better. There's a formula that we can use to determine our glass and how long it should stay inside of a controlled environment. So our octopi is going inside of an oven sitting at 890 degrees, and it will cool down over the period of 24 hours to eliminate the stress in the glass. So it's the ambient temperature that will shock the molecules of the glass into breaking. In simple terms, it's going to get too cold too quickly, and that will cause it to break and crack. One of my favorite facts about glass is that glass is defined as an amorphous solid, which means it depends on its environment if it will act as a liquid or a solid. But I think this is incredible. Even glass at its stable state, so any glassware in your home, theoretically, it's still a liquid since the molecules have yet to form a crystalline structure. So the molecules are still moving, although at a very slow rate. Theoretically, it's still a liquid. For that reason, some people believe that glass should be inside of its own state of matter, known as the glassy state, because it doesn't really fall between a solid and a liquid. It's pretty amazing. It's my favorite fact about glass. So notice how the team is broken up. Our visiting artist, Tony Sorgenfree, takes a center seat at the studio. He is our gaffer. He's the person in charge. He's orchestrating today's demonstration. We then introduce Eli, who's playing the role as the pole turner. The pole turner's job is to give the adequate heat that our gaffer has called for. If you hear the term flash, That means about 10 seconds inside of the reheating chamber. If you hear a long flash, it means about 15 to 20 seconds inside of the chamber. And the chamber is approximately 2,300 degrees Fahrenheit. Essentially, it is a round barrel on its side lined with fire brick made to insulate and keep the heat inside. Whenever we touch the glass, we like to use natural fibers. In this case, we can use a dense layer of cork. So if you're wondering how our process began, well, we can look to our right-hand side with one gather of glass. It's hard to believe, but our massive glass started in a similar process. Ooh, question on our left. How do we get the colors? Ooh, let me pass around a little bit of color for you. So color is just made by adding different metal oxides of the periodic table. If you don't mind me asking, what's your favorite color? Do you have a favorite color, sweetie? Blue glass. Oh, I like blue. So blue glass can be made by adding cobalt. So different metals. One metal that I want to point out is red and pink glass. Red and pink glass is some of the most expensive in our industry because they add gold. And that's as far as I want to go. I don't want to confuse you, but metals. And here's a little bar of orange. You can pass around and inspect it, check it out. And that's how our color begins. And then I can pass it to this end also. It's pretty heavy. It's amazing because white glass weighs like triple this weight because they add lead to it, and lead is very heavy. So the next step that we are going to add is to add a transfer rod, the punty. The punty is where we're going to build our whole sculpture off of. Now, to maximize the stability, we just essentially created a landing pad. Our new rod will be placed in that general area. Again, this is just to support all the weight that we are going to be working with. When this piece is complete, we will remove this clear glass using centuries-old glass cutting and carving techniques. So you will not see that clear glass when it's complete. This is only for stability purposes at this point. What's up, sweetie? How can I help you today? How much money would it be to buy glass? To buy this sculpture? Ooh. If you have to ask, I would say you can't afford it. I know it's... So the artwork that we see here will be shown in a gallery setting later on. Our visiting artist, Tony Sorgenfrey, is represented by the Vague Tree Gallery in Seattle. So one thing I want to point out is that glass blowing right now is going through a renaissance. What you see in front of you is relatively new. It began in the 60s. Prior to then, glass making was only kept in industrial factories. But in the 60s, Harvey Littleton, who's considered our glass father, he's also the instructor of Dale Chihuly. But he invented the first small furnace that could melt 50 pounds of glass and not 5,000 pounds of glass. So right now, glass blowing is going through this renaissance where it's no longer being used as to create like cups and bowls and vases. Rather, it's shifting to more into creating fine art. And this is how glass making is going to stay alive, is it needs to change because it can't continue to be how it was for thousands of years because that industry, sadly, is gone. We just cannot beat Target, Walmart on the price of their cups. Just impossible. How much glass do we use every day? Ooh, how much power? So I have to admit to you, our fuel source here is natural gas, and I have never asked the museum how much gas we use. It's because I'm afraid. I know once I find out that number, I'm never going to want to own a glass blowing studio, and it's going to break my heart. So I just don't ask. That's how I'm rolling right now. Thank you. So I do not know. I don't want to know. Secretly, I don't want to know. Yes, what's up? I love these questions, by the way. Powder? Ooh, powdered glass? It depends how dense we want the color layer to be. We have a lot of these crates here have Tony's color palette. So we can, whatever color you want, the manufacturer makes. It's like going to a candy store when you're buying color because they sell everything you could ever imagine. I always spend like 3 times as much as I want to spend whenever I buy color. It's just too pretty. It's too beautiful. At this time, I want to thank all our members that we see out in the museum. We love and appreciate all our members. So at this moment, thank you so much from everyone here at the Museum of Glass. We've brought over the punty. This is the rod that everything's going to be built upon. Once again, this area will be removed later on, so you won't be able to tell that this area was on there at one point. All that clear glass will be removed. Now, we made this rod quite massive, this punty massive. That's because there's going to be a lot of weight that's going to be attached to it. So here, Tony is using a pipe cooler. It's just cold water that we can apply on the rod so it can cool down. Now, our rods that we use, they're made out of stainless steel, a poor conductor of heat. Now, if you take a close inspection, you'll notice that that rod goes from its shiny stainless steel into a dull gray and black. We do not place our hand in the discoloration you see on the rod. I like to refer to it as the danger zone. If we place our hand there, guaranteed we're going home early with a severe burn. Now, as our massive glass gets larger, we take our left hand and we slide it closer to that darkened area. Our left hand is acting as a fulcrum, so the balancing point of a seesaw or a teeter-totter. So we're gonna clean up the back of the blade, and then we can add the handle, which will be the first element. So I want to point out that the color that we're using is a soft color. Just like walking outside on a sunny day, either wearing a black t-shirt or a white t-shirt, certain colors absorb more energy at different rates. Black color is a very soft color. It absorbs a lot of energy very rapidly. On the opposite spectrum is like white color. White color doesn't want to absorb as much energy. So in this case, we're working with glass that's a lot more softer since it is coated with black glass. And do we have any questions from our audience at this stage? Hopefully I haven't lost anyone quite yet. But if you do have a question, you let me know. Raise your hand or shout my name. My name is David. All right, so our visiting artist, Tony Sorgenfree, has now called for the first element. In preparation to that element, our first step is to take the handle and place it from the 900 degree area into the 1000 degree area. Another step is to elevate the handle. Since the flame is located on this side, by elevating the glass, we're ensuring that we're above 1000 degrees and more like about 1200 degrees. Now, another detail is that we've cooled down the chamber, the glory hole that's on the left-hand side. This is just to ensure that our handle doesn't break or crack when it meets the 2,300 degree environment. Oh, I love the smell of cork in the morning. One of our main focus is where the rod and the glass meet. We call this the moil. And the rod is constantly stealing heat from the glass. So if this piece is going to break or crack, it's always going to begin in the moil area. Again, this area down here. For that reason, you'll notice that the team will take care of that moil by using a flame, ensuring that the rod isn't stealing too much heat. How you feeling, Blake Julik? So Blake is going to be a senior later this year at Wilson High School. Again, the students that you see around are Tony's advanced students that he's brought along to help him during the demonstration. Question in our center. Why is the cone at an angle? Oh my God, I haven't got this question in a long time. So the cone is tilted, I believe at 15 degrees. This is for aesthetic reasons, but the major one is that it optimizes the area, the surface area of the cone. So it's elongated and we have a bigger diameter at our base cone. That's why it's tilted. And it's also tilted, I believe, facing north. But yeah, so our building was designed after world-renowned architect Arthur D. Erickson. He's also designed the city of Vancouver. So we have a lot of similarities to the city of Vancouver. But our cone-shaped structure comes from Tacoma's history. So Tacoma was founded on a logging town. We were the logging center of the globe with over 73 lumber mills in our area. With such a large lumber industry, they would burn a lot of excess wood, like sawdust, in incinerators that look very similar to the building that we're in right now, called wigwam burners or beehive burners. These burners were torn down when the logging industry left, but our architect got the design for this building from those burners. The closest burners, I would say, are out in the peninsula in Aberdeen, Washington, where there is still a logging center kind of going on there. But that's where we got our design from. And if you walk across Tacoma's waterfront, you can learn more about Tacoma's history, which I recommend since it's a beautiful sunny day today. Tacoma's waterfront, 10 minutes away from here. You're going to love it. I highly recommend it. One thing I don't know is that if our architect knew that there's buildings shaped like this for glass blowing in Europe. So it is a very functional shape, but again, I don't know if our architect knew that or not. Either way, we added a fan at the top, accelerates the hot air rising. I've always wanted to go up there. I'm very scared of heights, so I always kind of walk away when I have that option too. But one day I will. Damn, I broke my glasses, dude. I don't know. Did I snap them? So hot glass likes to stick to anything hot. So on contact, they are fused together. And this is our version of hot glue. We see a little bit of red and orange where the pieces will be attached. And once again, there is a clear idea of what's being made even before we gather glass on the rod. A little bit of water on the weak spot we added earlier. We will remove the clear glass that's on the end before we move forward. but we are going to be adding a wrap of glass, which will mimic the rope that ties together this artifact. That rope is being made on the left-hand side, and we are using a gold ruby color, to create or to mimic this look that we see on the ends. We will also repeat it on the pommel, which is the end portion. So this is what Blake's been training his whole glass blowing career, is these moments. So there's a lot of trust. The unspoken communication of glass making. You'll notice how we're standing by. You got this, Blake. So a lot of these students are Tony's advanced students. Once again, he does teach at Wilson High School, where he's a lead instructor. Tony also instructs here at the museum, part of our Hot Shop Heroes program. This is where veterans suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder and brain trauma use glass blowing as an art therapy. And this is the Museum of Glass is a leading program, part of Joint Base Lewis McCourt. And this is one of many programs that we offer here at the museum. So I want to point out some of the details that occur. We can spray a little bit of water inside of our furnace. This will just minimize the air bubbles and impurities that are gathered. This is a very high level of professional glass making. So if we see an air bubble or an impurity, we will take the time to pull away that impurity and remove it from our massive glass. And oftentimes we do that because the clear glass will just magnify any impurity. So although it may be a small air bubble, it looks a lot larger in the end result. Our gaffer, Tony Sorgenfree, again, our visiting artist, has called for one more of those wraps that will be added. So this torch is one of the hottest pieces of equipment on our hot shop floor, about 4,500 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, when we're taking these heats inside of our reheating chamber, about 2,300 degrees, oftentimes we're not staring directly inside of the chamber. Rather, there's a screen mesh that's on the shield that we can look through, and it really does minimize a lot of the heat and the glare that we face. Now, some safety precautions we take here at the museum is what we wear. We like to wear cotton specifically in our studio, and nothing like polyester, which can melt to your skin. We also don't allow open-toed shoes in our studio, so no sandals or Crocs. And then another detail is we need to wear some form of safety wear for our eyes. We need something to protect our beautiful eyes, of course, if that's safety glasses or just prescription glasses. Well, the next element is now beginning to get preheated. It will be the end element that will go on the end of the wooden base. After this element's added, we will be attaching the mantis that we made earlier this morning. So when you hear the term flash, it typically means about 10 seconds inside of the reheating chamber. Well, our visiting artist has been working with glass for over 20 years. Began to work with glass at the age of 14 in our community. Once again, Tacoma has a rich history of working with glass. We do have a glass blowing program in our middle school and high school public schools. It's one of the only places in the country to do so. And they are located in the same high school and middle school that Mr. Dale Chihuly attended. Now, Tony is inspired by Mesoamerican cultures, one culture being the Aztec culture, which he represents some of their artifacts using our media. Once again, my name is David. If you have questions at any time, you let me know. I'm more than happy to share my knowledge and experience of this medium. I have the greatest of opportunity to call Tony a great friend, but also a great mentor of mine. He's taught me so much in glass blowing, even some basics on how to constantly turn the rod and keep everything on center. When we're working on something flat like this, we're not rotating the rod as much, rather just flipping it back and forth. And you'll notice when we begin to add elements that we approach our medium differently. If you're heading out of here, thank you so much for stopping by. You enjoy the rest of your Monday. If you're sticking with us, we are just getting started. This is the assembly portion of our demonstration. We began this piece at around 9:30 in the morning, and this is really what we've been working towards, is the assembly portion. Once again, we started off by making a praying mantis. That mantis is sitting inside of here, and it will be the next element that's attached after this pommel, which is the end portion of it. When we add our mantis, we didn't add any legs to it, so we will make the legs live so they can look more realistic when attached to our Aztec artifact. You're fine. I would have done the same thing. So I want to point out that the colors that we're working with right now are not represented by what you see. The color of the glass is turning dark red and orange at times, and it is discolored. When it cools back down, we will then see the real colors that we have been working with all along. We do have this brilliant Zimmerman red that's below the color, and there's also a black powdered glass on the surface. But this red color that we see here will be the color of pretty much our blade when completed. And I want to point out that this red right here, it's not even made anymore by the manufacturers. It's discontinued. It's very rare to find this color, but it is brilliant. It's really beautiful. This red, to make, they actually add a lot of gold to it, which gives it this brilliant, almost bright cherry red color. I don't even know how Tony got his hands on this color. He said that it was a gift from someone that his mentor gave him a few years back. Some shapes that our students often learn a lot are the basic fundamentals of glass, which is a cylinder, sphere, and cone. If you can master these three shapes in glass, you can master every other shape. You'll notice here that we do not settle. In glass making, if it doesn't look right on the end of the rod, it's not going to look right in your hands. For that reason, we do not settle. We will continue to work on our sculpture until it looks perfect. Now, Tony does have a lot invested into today's sculpture. The team around him, the color, and really the time that he spent working on this sculpture. So for that reason, we're gonna make sure that it looks nothing less than perfect. You cannot take the teacher out of the glass maker. Even though Tony's concentrated on his sculpture, you'll notice that he's still giving directions to his students on how they should approach their own pieces. Well, it looks like our mantis has now been moved over to the hot end of our garage. Once again, the garage is a piece of equipment floating in the center of the studio. It's about 1,000 degrees on the hottest end. And we are getting ready to attach our last element. Now, when we attach our mantis, there's still a lot more of glass sculpting that needs to be done. The legs have not been completed yet. Those legs we will complete live in front of you all here today. Great job, Blake Julik. So a lot of these students right here, this is really their moment to shine. This is their moment that they've been training for many years. Now our mantis is very fragile. Mass holds heat, and this mantis has a lot of thin parts attached to it. For that reason, we've turned off some of our fans, since our mantis will be very cold at this stage. We've even opened the doors to our reheating chamber, our glory hole. Typically, it's about 2,300 degrees, but this time around, it's probably floating just under 2,000. Now we are going to be attaching another wrap element. Again, this will mimic the string that holds our artifact together. Wait, Jack, this will be the legs, right? All right, well, I think this is the moment. Our mantis, our stunning mantis, has exited the garage. We will be attaching it here shortly, and we can get a closer view at all the details. This mantis took about an hour and a half to complete from start to finish. There's a lot of details that are involved when sculpting. Now, glass blowing is very misleading because we are not always blowing through a blowpipe. Just like today's case, a better term would be glass sculpting or glass making. Now, before we attach our mantis, we're just going to ensure that the mantis, the rod that it's located on right now, is weak enough to break with a slight tap. So it needs to be very fragile when attached. Now, we're ensuring that that weak spot is weaker than the rest of the weak spots that we have. Since we are going to tap it, the vibrations will cause our massive glass to break off of its designated area. When you hear our visiting artist, Tony Sorgenfree, saying torch the punty, again, we are really torching the area where the glass rod and the glass itself meet, the moil. It's because that steel rod is constantly stealing heat from the glass. If our sculpture is going to break or crack, one main culprit can be that rod. As long as we maintain that temperature above 1,200 degrees Fahrenheit, a crack cannot spread or even form. I believe this is now the heat. Hello. It's going good. Happy Monday. How are you doing today? Well, everyone, you're more than welcome to roam around the Museum of Glass. When this residency is completed, Tony will leave behind 2 sculptures. One of these sculptures will be showcased around the Museum of Glass, like our top balcony area. If you have an Instagram, we did write down Tony's Instagram. You can tag him if you would like, but you're more than welcome to take as many photos and videos as you'd like. Hello. So here we are removing the punty residue that was left behind by the transfer rod. Now the last few steps is to attach the legs to our mantis Again, we didn't add the legs so we can get more of a realistic, natural look by attaching them hot. Now that massive glass will be added, and we can see it on the left-hand side of the studio. Well, I'm sure if you're standing in the top balcony, you can hear some of the communication going on between the team. Well, the Museum of Glass has a lot of social media. If you're going to head out of the museum, you can always check online on our website, YouTube channel, or just even Instagram. The Museum of Glass will constantly post updates about the artwork that was created here at the museum. And don't forget to even follow, if you have an Instagram, our visiting artist. We've written down his Instagram. Now, one thing you're gonna notice with the color, especially on the mantis, is sometimes the color looks like metal. It looks shiny. What's happening is that the color that we're using, when it's exposed to a oxygen low environment, the metals that make the color of the glass rise to the surface in search of oxygen. When it does so, it leaves almost a metallic look, shine on the end. Again, it's just due to the low oxygen environment that's happening inside of the chamber we're using. We refer to this as a reducing effect, and it's up to Tony if he wants that design or not. I love the reducing effect, though, personally. and he dropped his tool, so he lost his window. So once again, glass blowing, it's all about timing. It's all about heat. There's a lot of unspoken communication going on between the team, and a lot of spoken communication too. Oh, these are the last moments. We are now beginning to introduce more heat onto our piece. Now, before we break something free from the rod, what we're looking for is movement. Movement coming from the end of the puntee. We will also torch the thinner parts, like our mantis, since mass holds heat. So the legs will lose a lot more heat than everything else does. By introducing more heat onto the puntee, we're ensuring that our glass, it's simply too hot for a crack to spread into the blade and not just our designated area. So the last touches are being done, and again, more introduction to the rod, more heat. Our next step is the annealing process. This is eliminating the stress in the glass. Essentially, if it's left out in the open, the molecules will get too cold too quickly. To prevent the molecules from breaking or cracking, we will set them inside of a controlled environment called the annealer. The annealer we are using today is on your left-hand side of the hot shop floor with the green number 1. It is sitting at 890 degrees and will be the home of everything that's produced here today for the next 24 hours. When we look at the history of glass making, oh man, melting sand into glass, that was easy. The Egyptians did that. The difficult part was preventing it from breaking. The Egyptians would bury their glass in hot sand and hoped it didn't break. Nowadays, we know better. So there's a formula that we can use to determine its length inside of our annealer. Based on the thickness of the glass, it will vary inside of this oven, but our artifact will stay inside of the annealer again for about 24 hours to eliminate the stress. I do want to point out that this is just a blank canvas. There is still a lot more work that needs to be done. On the surface, there is black glass, but underneath, there is this brilliant red glass that we see out here, and that's what will be located underneath the color. So it will look similar to our example we have out here. Tony will take this sculpture to his studio where he will cold work the surface, eliminating that black glass to showcase the brilliant red that's hidden below. So there is still several hours of cold working that will happen once this piece is cooled down. This is just the tip of the iceberg, and then the clear glass that's found on the front will also be eliminated later on using centuries-old glass cutting and carving techniques. If you're joining us, welcome to the museum. This is our last sculpture of this morning. We've been working on this sculpture since 9:30. We are only going to be making 2 sculptures for the whole day. So when we return, we'll start another one of these sculptures, and it should take us all the way till closing, till 5 o'clock. We started by making the mantis, which took a little bit over an hour to make. When we return from our lunch, we will be making a sculpture similar to the one on your left-hand side of the studio. Did I hear 2 heats? I want to point out that one of the students, Jack Spitzer, is now suiting up in a heat protective layer. Jack is an incredibly talented glass artist that is one of Tony's students. Again, he's very, very advanced in glass blowing. Now, he has taken the role of putting our sculpture in a controlled environment. Again, the annealer sitting on our left-hand side of the studio. Now, this gear that we're wearing is very similar to what firefighters use in a high-temperature situation. So protective layers and Kevlar gloves. And I would say that Jack is one of the most advanced Hilltop artist students there is. Very, very talented. What a fantastic sculpture, Tony. Can we give Tony and the whole Hot Shop crew a round of applause? They did an enormous job. Again, they've been working since 9:30 this morning. Our Aztec artifact will cool down for 24 hours. Around dinner time tomorrow, we can open our annealer and hold our finished sculpture. This does conclude our morning live glass blowing demonstration. We will return in approximately 1 hour to continue our next sculpture of the evening. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. You enjoy the rest of your Monday, everyone. Enjoy the sun, enjoy the week. When it's cold, will we be